A computer error sends a squad of US jets en route to Moscow. If they can't be stopped, the strike will almost certainly initiate nuclear war. The stakes don't get much higher than Failsafe, a thriller with valuable lessons even now, 6 decades later. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
This is a movie podcast. We are working through Sidney Lumet season, or Sidney Lumet season. I keep hearing people say Lumet, which makes me think that's probably the right pronunciation, even though it looks like it should be silent. But every single person I've heard say it has said Lumet.
I want to hear him say it, because it seems French to me, and the French are going to drop that too.
No, if you Google it, everything says say the T, even though it feels wrong. It feels like Lumet should be right. But whatever.
Absolutely.
We're going through the season, and today we are landing on 1964's Failsafe. So pretty high concept, pretty, Cold War inspired thriller, although it's not a historical film, as we'll get into. This is not an event that actually happened, but it's all about the tensions of nuclear war and all that kind of thing, and what happens when an accident means that America might accidentally launch a missile towards Russia.
What?
And how can we stop that? That's the basic premise, but we all keep this strictly spoiler-free. I feel like it'd be very easy to allude to certain things if we're not careful. So, no spoilers until we give the warning. Of course, if you are enjoying the show, hit the like button on YouTube, and you can give us 5 stars on your podcast app, all that stuff. And you can support us with Patreon or YouTube membership and get bonuses, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, yeah, this is what, movie number 4 of the season?
Yep.
We're in the middle of it now. Did that put you in a good mood going into this one? Are you feeling like we're on a bit of a roll?
I mean, I'll say that obviously the first 2 movies that we covered out of this season were not, strictly speaking, our favorites, all things considered, but between this and Pawnbroker last time, just to immediately skip ahead to the question where you asked me if I like it, I think we're on a good streak here. I think we're in a good little piece of his history.
Yeah, this is a strong thriller. This is, it's all people in a room watching a big radar screen and people debating the ethics of what to do and what to do. It's about paranoia and who should strike first and all that kind of stuff. It very much gets into all that, and I remember when I was studying the Cold War, and whenever you do study that time period and you talk about mutually assured destruction and all that, this movie feels like, in the book it was based on, maybe even more specifically, feels entirely born out of that idea of what if something happens, and what if it's not even an intentional thing? How much does that everything come tumbling down because of it? So, yeah, simple enough premise. We have a lot of characters. We have presidents, generals, we have advisors, in a few different locations. Although fair enough, in Lumet kind of style at this point, because it is effectively 3 or 4 locations that we keep going back to, they kind of feel like, oh, we don't just have one central location, we've got about 4 of them, but they do feel like the 4 main locations of the entire movie, and they're all very memorable by the time you get to the end of the film. So yeah, lots to talk about, of course, once we get into the thick of it, but yes, obviously got a big cast here. We've got at least a couple of returning faces from 12 Angry Men, of course, which is Sidney's first big movie, and a few other people that I recognise. Matthau's in here. Dan O'Hillery, who I mainly know as the company man from RoboCop. He's also in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. He's much younger here, of course, but I was like, oh, he seems familiar. I'm getting a little tinge of recognition from his face and voice. But that's who it is. That's who I was recognising. And then there's at least a couple of faces I'm like, I've definitely seen this face on a Twilight Zone episode, because it's around the same era, which isn't surprising. But yes. For further go into your thoughts.
Yes. I knew the subject matter going in. I knew that it was going to be about this sort of nuclear Cold War era sort of stuff, tensions between Soviets and the US. But what I wasn't expecting, is that everyone in this is such a powerhouse actor. Like, there is no bad roles in this movie, I think, at all. Even the ones that feel a bit more campy or whatever, like, they deliver top tier talent every time. So across the board, when we get to our ratings rundown over on Patreon and all that, and you're telling me to pick out a standout, I'm gonna have to sit here for 5 straight minutes just wheedling it down. There's no way I can pick easily. And then on top of that, just it's so good at what it does of taking what is already like a stressful situation and doing that. And even if you have an idea of, okay, I get how this is going to go, I understand the beats of this, it still keeps you on the edge of your seat constantly. There is always this tension to it, and it is constantly building. It never eases up, and it's so masterfully done in that way that I don't know, like, obviously I wasn't alive during the Cold War, a Cuban Missile Crisis, nothing like that. I don't have a line of reference for the tension and fear that must have been existing during that time period. But I have to imagine that this movie is like getting that level of like, you keep on worrying that like it's all going to go wrong, that we're right on the needle's edge. No matter what anybody wants to do to stop it, it just keeps moving along. And it's so well done. I just keep coming back to that. The tension in it is so perfect. I cannot think of another movie that I just did not ever want to pause for even a fraction of a second. I just had to keep on seeing what was happening.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because comparing to 12 Angry Men specifically, there is a lot of parallels between them in a weird way, where they're both about people having to debate what to do and what the ethically right thing to do is. And it's all about like, well, if we make this choice then this happens, if we make this choice then this other thing happens, and what's the right thing? Now, arguably, it's that all turned up to 11. I will say that I do think 12 Angry Men is the better film, because 12 Angry Men is just a straight up masterpiece. It's a 10 out of 10. But this kind of takes that idea, and it's like, you know, one, we've got more of a ticking time clock because nukes might go off. We have, you know, larger stakes because entire cities, if not entire countries, might be decimated if the things don't happen. So it's almost like taking that idea of like people in a room debating what to do and trying to solve it. Only here we add in some other reasons as to why, like, some characters have certain viewpoints, why they break down in certain ways, why there's maybe a trust. And there's definitely kind of a central idea of like hoping for the better of humanity to come out and like for common sense to prevail. And, you know, obviously these are all things that play into the story as it goes. So I'm being very careful not to spoil anything. I don't want to, as much as it's an old movie, as much as like, because it did some surprising things for me, because I did not know a lot about where this was going to go, and it did take some interesting turns. So I'm excited to talk about that once we get into the spoilers. But yeah, cast the next level. It's very tight in terms of its direction. Obviously, at this point, Lumet is very, very good at just like, how do you handle a tense conversation? Sometimes, you know, there's a running thing once the president's involved, which obviously is going to get involved. Henry Fonda plays the president, and most of his scenes are in a room with just one other person who's his translator for when he's going to be on the phone with someone who speaks Russian. And the first time there's one of these calls, the camera just sits there in a two-shot the entire time. It does not move. And it's like, no, you two actors, you're going to goddamn act. And you're going to sell this entire scene in your performance. And it's so well done. And you're so on the edge of your seat because so much lingers on. And it's so good because normally it's like, okay, if you have someone speaking a different language, you need subtitles. But that's built into the scene because the whole thing's like, it's almost like he's having a conversation with the translator, except it's actually with someone else that we don't really hear that well. Like we hear a little mumble on the phone, but it's not, you know, something we hear properly, you know?
No, it's such a complex breakdown because obviously the words being said are between two people who are obviously opposed to each other, but do want to find some sort of common ground to avoid complete nuclear destruction of the entire world. But this guy who's relaying all of this conversation is on the president's side. So you have the words being said being very confrontational, but then this dude's acting is like, this is happening. Like you see this nervousness in him that is, I thought for sure when that scene started, I'm like, all right, Henry Fonda's going to act laps around this guy and he's just going to sit there relaying the conversation. And then he just stole the scene half the time.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like him having to interpret, because that's one of the things that he says to him before they even have this first call. He's like, "Hey, I just want to hear the words he's saying. I want you to interpret how he's saying them. Like, does he sound confident, scared, angry? Does it sound like he's lying? Like, obviously it's just your opinion, but you can understand the inflections in a way that I can't. So please give me your input." Like, honestly, one of the things about this movie that I was thinking about is like these were especially when he was on the phone with the Soviet premier and all that. I was like, oh god, imagine if this was the current president, like having to do these conversations, having to like negotiate his way through, and I'm like, oh my god, like we're like, I don't want to say we're lucky because that doesn't sound quite right either, but like I'm just saying. I was getting chills thinking about what the alternate version of this would be with
this movie would have the exact same 20-minute lead up until the president appears, and then it would end in 3 minutes with multiple blinding white flashes and end. Like that'd be it.
You just like push all the buttons immediately.
Yep.
Don't even think about it. So yeah, a lot going on. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what else to say without spoiler. Obviously, it's not a movie with a score, really. It really pares things back on that regard.
There's absolutely no music in this at all. However, apparently there was a score made for the movie, but then the director, Sidney, he decided, let's go silent. It's going to work better for this. And so the score is available. It's kind of a nervous, jazzy sort of sound. It's been described as. So okay. I don't know if it would really work, but the way this is presented, I think it's much more tense to not have the score.
I wonder if that's like on one of the Blu-rays or something, if that's like an extra where you can put that on as an alternate soundtrack.
Maybe.
Let's get it with the score added back in. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a cool feature if they haven't.
Yeah, I don't know if there was ever a version released with the score, so if it was added in, it would have to be added in at someone else's discretion.
Yeah, but as a bonus, is like, hey, see what could have been. I don't think that's too bad. It's never going to default to that version, Like, it's like, hey,
right.
Here's what this is. Here's an explanation of it, and obviously it doesn't quite fit the intent. I don't know. It just kind of depends. But yeah, it's interesting all the same. Cinematography is great. And one of the things that was sticking out to me a lot is even before things go down, is there's a lot of really dramatic lighting, especially in some of the... I can't say the war room, because the war room's the room in the Pentagon with the other characters, but the room with all the controls, right, in Omaha, right, that one. I'll call it the base, right? We'll just call it the military base. There's so many scenes early on in that where the characters that are having the conversation are almost in silhouette, as all you can really see is the room behind them, because of just how it's lit, and it just feels so dramatic. There's a lot of like use of shadows on faces to make it feel like people are being, their judgment's being clouded, that they're in a dark place. They're, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on to keep it visually interesting and not just feel like we're watching a few people in a room. So credit where credit's due on that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would want to, not so much for the cinematography, but just something I really want to make clear for people is that this is a movie that doesn't really have an antagonist. Or let me rephrase. It has no villain. It has no obvious bad guys, but it does have people who, because of the choices they make, forwards the plot into the certain directions that it goes. And obviously those would be antagonists. They're the ones antagonizing things. But the movie does a great job of always making you understand that these are people that can be related to. They're making these choices because of the culture they are brought up in, the people that they are installed as, like the generals are making very specific decisions because they are generals, etc. And that is something that the movie does a great job to really lay into, is that even when somebody makes what seems to the audience to be the worst possible decision, you still get why they made it.
Yeah, and I think one of the key themes of the movie, which kind of adds into this idea of them not being a villain, is one of the questions brought up early on is like, well, if everything goes down, if shit hits the fan, who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for this? And there's kind of this idea that the system's set up in a way where everyone gets to say, oh, this is someone else's fault. This part's someone else's fault. No one actually has to take the blame as being the one who's responsible for starting a nuclear war.
I understand that this is so much bigger than that, like this is nuclear war, but I feel like I've seen, especially in modern days, all of these conversational points being used for like, Is it ChatGPT's company that is responsible for copyright infringement? Is it the person doing the other stuff? It's all that sort of stuff where you hand it over to a machine, you tell the machine to make choices, and then you just put your hands back and say, whatever happens now is up to the machine. It's not us. We're not the ones doing this.
Yeah, or even just in like a more mundane sense, the idea that you work at a cardboard company and still everyone's like passing blame for something because it's no one's fault that this thing happened. No one wants to take responsibility. It's like somehow it's this department's fault for this part, but then they say, no, it's not our fault because of this part. And so on. It just kind of rolls up the chain, and it's like, well, and then the other big theme of the movie as well is this idea that all the machines and computers, and obviously it's funny to us now to think of the computers from the 60s being too advanced, but this idea that the computers operate so much quicker at certain things than people do that it's impossible for people to have complete control over them, or at least catch things quick enough to like, acknowledge that there's been an error or a mistake or something. And as a result, you've taken kind of some trust away from, or you've put in too much faith in the machines so that humans can't correct. And that point's even brought up at one point because what are Matthau's character's kind of he's probably the closest to an antagonist for the audience in a lot of ways because he's the counter voice to everyone else basically because he's like deeply scared of communism. He's the one who's pro let's fire the missiles, all the rest of it. And at one point when they're arguing that like a computer system might have had a fault, he says, well, that's not possible because humans always oversee the machines. And immediately the person that's talking to him is like, no, that's not true. It's possible for the machines to make a mistake, and the humans can't react quick enough. Like he blurts it out so confidently. Does Matthau's character that the idea? It just again, it reminds me of a lot of modern things where people will just say things about, oh, ChatGPT can't make a mistake. What are you talking about? It makes mistakes constant. I mean, that's a really weird example because like AI, if you search something on Google and the AI gives you an answer, like half the time it's just completely factually the opposite of what's true.
Oh my God. I love when people give examples of them asking Google AI a question and like Google starts off saying, no, this isn't true. And then it shows its logic. And by the end, it's like, so yes, that's why it's true. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, hell, someone even in this movie even says the more complex mechanicals, devices and computers get, the more opportunity there is for there to be an error because there's more points of failure. There's more complex things happening. And that's only gotten more true is like 60 years have passed since then. Yeah. So here we are.
I just to stick on Walter Matthau's character, because I do think you say that he's kind of the biggest antagonist there. Just to go back to my point on they're not really being a real villain. He is the closest you get, but I do like this aspect of him existing as his character's introduction is essentially saying that he believes, without a doubt, nuclear war is going to happen. So from his perspective, it's about getting out on top, assuming that war is just going to happen no matter what. Whereas everyone else, not everyone, but most all the other characters are still in the belief that we can avert nuclear war, that we can back down off that ledge. So it still does a good job of showing, based off his belief system, he's making rational decisions. He's not just wringing his hands and saying, yes, let's destroy everything.
He gets close a couple times where he starts making some suggestions that are very bold, but he does come from a different direction to it. And at the very least, the start of the movie shows that while he has an attitude that we might find a little distasteful, he's very, he sticks to it, right? He doesn't betray what he said about himself. He kind of sticks to it right up front.
It's not self-serving. He is absolutely rigid in his moral beliefs. They just are very bad beliefs.
Yes. And, obviously, nuclear war might still happen, but at least so far in the last 60 years, that's not happened yet. So, hey, the other characters were mostly right, seemingly.
Yay.
For now. Who knows? Tomorrow's always here.
We'll get there.
Tomorrow's always here. So, I think we have to get to spoilers so we can talk about everything more freely. So we'll do that. We'll get into the movie. Spoilers from this point on. For failsafe, you have been warned. So, where
do you want to go?
I mean, look, the movie's got a ballsy ending, okay? Let's just get to, because the whole time I am convinced, especially since they set up a seed earlier on. It's like, because they're like, okay, right, this, because basically all that happens in the movie that's the inciting incident is there's a computer malfunction, a glitch, and there's a little bit of debate later that maybe some jamming signal the Russians are using might have had a part in it happening, but it's not like they intentionally tried to do this. It's just kind of a domino effect. And again, it's like, oh, it's all of our faults collectively that this is all happening. We have to accept that. But we'll get into all that stuff. So this fall happens, and the plane that's up there, right, the squadron of planes, they get the little beacon that says, hey, we've authorized blah blah blah, and they get the code up, and they rip open their envelopes, and it's got the codes, and they basically get a false positive saying you are to launch nuclear missiles, and then they open like their other envelope that tells them what their plane's target is, and it says Moscow, and it's like, shit, okay, that's what the movie's now about, is that this plane's going to go and try and nuke Moscow. Okay,
I love the bit there, because like they go through so much of saying like, we've got, because it's called failsafe. So what they keep on coming back to is this fact of we've got redundancies. We have all this extra stuff on top of all this other stuff that should be able to catch anything. We should be able to stay on top of all of it. But then when they're explaining the actual like nuclear launch system, they're like, when it comes down to it, the president has to give the go ahead for that. However, people can imitate the president's voice. People can like imitate all this stuff. So what we did was we said the president gives the order, and then we just push a button and the whole failsafe system like starts going. And it's like, okay, well, can we jump in the middle of that? It's like, not really. Once the failsafe system starts, that's kind of it.
That's the thing. There's basically no way to recall them. And even when the president himself gets through to them, they're like, no, we can't believe you, because you could easily be an imposter. We still have to go on our mission. And this is the thing, because one of the theories they have on the ground is like, oh, these pilots went nuts, are they acting unhinged? And it's like, nah, we don't think so. And everything we see says, no, they are following their orders that they believe to be correct, and they are being strict to them, all the rest of it. But the whole time the movie's playing out, and they're doing various things, I'm like, okay, last second, they're going to stop this from happening. And the seed that I thought they put in place for it was, hey, the head pilot, the colonel that's flying the plane, or is it Colonel? Yes, Colonel. Colonel Grady, is that, okay, he won't listen to the president because he expects people to mimic his voice because he's famous. Can we find his wife? And I thought that was the setup for how they're going to get him to stand down, is that it's going to be this kind of moment of like her trying to convince him, and him having that conscience, that fight in his head of, if she's right and this is a fake order and I'm about to start World War III, like, that I can't go through with this. And like that ultimately was going to be the thing that makes him, and he just like ignores her, he turns it off, and I'm like, wait, so the Russian's going to shoot it down? And then no, it turns out the offer the president makes is going to have to happen. Now, what is the offer the president makes, you might ask, dear audience? Well, as they're getting closer and closer, and the president and the Russian or the Soviet premier have been chatting about what to do, and he's like, hey, we have to retaliate if this thing hits. The president comes up with a solution to stop it from turning into an actual nuclear war, and you can kind of see where it's going, because he asks like one of these other high-up generals to go and get in a plane and fly to New York, and you're like, oh god, he's going to offer up a city as sort of, to make it even. So the end of this movie, the way this film ends, is the implication that this plane is nuking, an American plane to be precise, is nuking New York. And we get quick flashes of people on the streets, and it's not even like you see an effect, it's just quick flashes, cut to white, credit roll. And it's very stark. It's like, the end of this movie is the president ordering a nuclear strike on New York as recompense for the fact that Moscow has been obliterated.
And again, like, I cannot overstress to the audience how much it just keeps ratcheting up the tension, even in the last seconds of this movie. Like, there is no denouement. There is no, like, we crested and we're going to let the audience relax here for a second. It keeps going because, like, again, the bomber makes its way to Moscow, and they do this whole thing they set up in advance where they've got ambassadors in both cities on the lines, and that will be their cue, is when the ambassador's phone basically melts in their hand from nuclear radiation. That is the cue to say the bomb is dropped, and therefore we can assume that we have to not retaliate, but we have to give up our own city in order to do that. And so you hear that sound happen, and even then at that point you're like, maybe the Russian general won't force them to go through with it. Maybe he'll
jump in and say, "Look,
yeah,
we know we know you're willing to do it. You don't have to do it.
Right.
Do some sort of act of kindness."
Right.
But
no. He doesn't. And then he calls up the guy in the pilot seat, and he's like, "You got to do that." And then he's like, "Yes, okay, I will do." And then you're thinking maybe he won't go through with it because like his wife and kids are in the city. Maybe there's a chance. And then like he seems to have like a little, I won't call it an out of body experience, but he obviously the nerves get to him a little bit, and you don't directly see like, did he do it? Did he manage to flip the switch before it happens? But then it does those quick flashes, flash of white, and you're like, literally the very last shot is you realizing, oh my God, he did it. It actually happened. And then the movie ends and he's like, oh, war is hell. I hate it.
Yeah, and he takes his life because he has that sort of moment. Because the movie actually starts with this character, General Black, having a dream, this nightmare that he's been having about a bull.
Yes.
And I don't really know what to make of that too much, but it doesn't come back until the very end where he's like in the pilot seat and he's seemingly already hit the switch and he's sort of lying back dying. Because his wife and kid are in the city, like you said. We also find out at one point the president's wife is also in New York, so he's made that choice. And I think I like what it's saying with that. It's like him saying, I can't just pick a city that I know that no one I care about is like involved in. It has to be something with personal cost, otherwise I'm being selfish.
All right, Russia, we're willing to give up the entirety of North Dakota. How does that sound?
I don't think that would be seen as an equal trade.
Nah, probably not.
Can I even name a city in North Dakota? I don't think I can.
I feel like I have one, but I don't want to say it in case it's not actually
You're
in North
American.
Dakota.
You should know a city in North Dakota.
I picked North Dakota because nobody knows about North Dakota.
Can you name a city in South Dakota?
Hold on. North Dakota. Yes, Bismarck. Everyone knows about Bismarck.
Bismarck? That's Eastern European. That's not an American city.
Yeah. Also, I just looked up the population in 2024. Not even back when this was made. The population is less than 1 million people across all of North Dakota. Meanwhile, I think they said like 30 million people in Moscow at the time. So, yeah, not really a good trade.
Yeah, that's not a lot of people. Pretty sure that's less people in Scotland, but
probably.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, okay. So anyway, so all this, and we'll go back obviously and talk through all the beats and like the character stuff and whatnot. But I felt it was important to like just sort of establish where this was building to, and that this is not ending with we solved it at the last second.
Yeah,
the happiest
this
thing.
Isn't juror number 8 walking out of the courthouse saying, "We did it. We did good."
I do like to think, though, that juror number 8 is literally the same character in here, though. He became the president. This is him.
There is a bit where they're trying to figure out what happened, and they're talking about like all the computer malfunctions or whatever, and people are saying like the odds of that or all these malfunctions happening at the same time is so incredibly low. And he picks up the phone and is just like, "But is it possible?" And I'm like, "That's the thing. You said that in the other movie."
I mean, yeah. So I think all that stuff is great. It ramps up the tension, and the only kind of happiness you get, the only good thing that comes out of it at the end, really, and this is debatable, I suppose, is that the final time he talks to the Russian premier, is he says, we can only hope that we have learned something from this. And like the premier says, yeah, like the best thing we can say as men right now is that we will never let this ever happen again. And that's the best you get. Like these two cities, millions of people are going to die or have already died. The best we can do is take this as a warning to tighten our act up a little bit and make sure we don't get... Because, all of the building of this and the paranoia, like the reason why they can't call back their planes once this has happened is because they're so goddamn paranoid of the enemy, like tricking them, that they've made it impossible. Like they have put all these systems in place to make it impossible for these pilots to accept any orders. So they've done this. This was people who made these choices that have put them in this situation where they can't correct an error because they didn't believe. This is believing the Titanic can't sink. Well, here it is. Here's the iceberg.
No, I mean, you're dead right. But I also I love the idea that it goes back and forth between the two, where it's like, it was our mechanical failure. We're the ones who caused this mistake. But then as he's talking to the premier, they explicitly say, like, we may have established a jamming device that is the reason you can't call your pilots right now. And they're like, okay, well, that's on you then. Can you please stop the jamming device so we can call our pilots? But by that point, it's too late. And they're like, oh, you're just imitating the president's voice. I've been told about this one before.
Yeah, we're not going to believe that. Yeah, and I think one of my other favorite things is this idea that we never see the Soviets, we never see them making their decisions, but you can clearly tell from the little rumblings on the phone and from the little beats that are happening that they are having the exact same debates. They are having the exact same problem where one or two people are freaking out. There's a big part in the last half of the movie where the president says, hey, we're literally on the line with the Soviets, and I am authorizing and giving you an order to share every bit of information to help them shoot down these planes. You're to help them take down this plane. Because obviously it's one thing to offer up an entire city by the end of the movie, but I don't think anyone, as much as it may personally hurt them a little bit, everyone's kind of on board. It's worth shooting down one plane with a few pilots to save the possibility of nuclear war.
Right. But then the other side of that is that when the president gives that authorization, the very first thing that the Russians say is, tell us your weaknesses in your weapon system. Tell us how we can stop. And everyone in the war room is like, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think we should be doing that.
Yeah, so it's all this idea of they have to get over their preconceived notions of who the enemy is for the greater good. And, you know, like I said,
also,
on you go.
Yeah. Also in that same sequence, the bit I absolutely love to show that comparison between the two is, we'll get to him. There's this one character who's a bit more shaky, a bit more twitchy about things. And he essentially tries to stage a coup because he's like, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. They're our enemies. And after he stages the coup, he gets caught. They don't let him do his thing. But the original general guy gets back on the phone and he's like, hey, I'm willing to continue working with you. And the Russian on the other side's like, dude, don't worry about it. That's happened like twice over here already.
He already knows, yeah.
We got it.
Oh, there's a lot of things about that I like. So that colonel who tried to stage the revolt, that's Colonel Cascio,
yep.
Yeah. He's he's a bit twitchy, and they set him up at the start of the movie when our other general here, General Bogan, who's the one in charge in this room, when he goes to get him early on because they've got this thing to show some senator or whoever it is around, he goes to pick him up, and he picks him up at his family's house, and his parents are clearly alcoholics, right? And there's kind of this weird like shame that this colonel has when they're sitting in the car, and Bogan doesn't mention it. He just tries to make some small talk about what they're doing that day, and the entire time the performance on this actor Fritz Weaver, who's playing Cassio, he just looks mortified and like almost quivering in shame that he's been seen with this family that he doesn't, he's ashamed of, and he wants to be seen as a serious, military man, whatever you want to call it. And so this keeps building up, obviously, throughout the movie. When we get to this point, he's the one who says, no, I don't think we should do this. And he actually hits Bogan over the head and then stands up and says, I'm taking command of this room. This is un-American or whatever. And I actually really loved that this doesn't go anywhere, because I was a little bit worried for a second. Like, why would, I thought maybe they're going to pull a thing where half the people in the room, side with them or something and have, a face-off kind of thing. But instead, very quickly, two of the uniformed guys just come up and grab him, and they're like, no, you're under arrest. You clearly just assaulted your superior officer. This is mutiny, you madman. But the nuance...
I also love he adds on that little extra bit in his justification. He's like, the president has told me he's always been suspicious of the general. And the general's a nervous wreck and he's not fit for duty. And I'm like, I think they're talking about you, bro.
Yeah, that's like him raving like a madman trying to justify what he's doing. But the nuance here that I really like, though, is after he's taken out, Bogan gets back up and he's kind of he's nursing his head a little bit. And the guy who's been visiting, who's been kind of he's the guy that's been explained to earlier on what the system's like, because that's when we get to the audience character who's like, oh, we have to explain to him how this computer system works. He says something about Cassio being a nut job. I don't even remember what the line was. And Bogan turns to him, still nursing his head, that has been hurt by this man who just tried to do what he did. And he turns and says, no, any man can crack under this pressure. He's a good soldier. He shuts him down. He's like, you're not bad-mouthing him. I know what he just did. I know what he just did to me, but you're not doing that. I like the nuance of that, because it was everyone recognized that this man just lost his shit, and no one's thinking, oh, he's a villain now. He's siding with the enemy. He's clearly just someone who needs help, and he's cracked under the pressure. So I like that.
And that's I again, going back to that idea of the movie does not allow for villains. It only allows for people who are steadfast in their beliefs, but the beliefs go against the greater good. And that's this guy. You see his entire background. You get why he's in this state. When he's being dragged away, his whole thing is him just screaming out like, "Oh, you! I'm better than you. I'm better than you." Is the thing he keeps saying out. Where there's obviously this sort of like inferiority complex he's got because of his family at home, and the fact that he is being forced to bow down to the Soviets essentially in his eyes and give up all their state secrets, like. It's humiliating for him, and he can't deal with that. And it's such a good way of examining this character, who frankly is like C tier on the list of characters in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, even before that big moment, though, there's the moment where he tries to, the Bogan says, "Hey, they've just requested." He's got the touch phone and he's holding it down. He's saying they've asked for coordinates on our planes, and he comes over. And he just freezes and he just sort of starts shaking. He can't say it. He doesn't want to say these like covert things, these classified details to the Soviets. And then a second soldier's called upon and he can't do it either. And it ends up being like a technician guy that he gets up. He's like, "You know the answers to these questions, answer them now." And he finally kind of stammers it out. But he has to go through like 3 people before someone follows the orders the president just gave to actually open up. And the president made it very clear when he was given this order, any hesitation could be disastrous because they might think this isn't a mistake anymore. They might think we're up to something. Because so much of this, and I think that's the genius thing about following this from the perspective of the side who is making the, I mean, again, you could say, the Soviets jamming thing maybe influenced it a little bit, but I think following this movie from the side that is the one who's got the nukes that are going to incorrectly target someone, I think makes a lot of sense, because putting us on the side of the ones who are trying to convince that this is just a mistake. And because you could play this the opposite way where we're on the other side, right? That's I mean, obviously you'd flip the roles because they wouldn't make it from Moscow's perspective, but let's say you flip the roles of what their situation is in the movie, right? Where Moscow's had a mistake and one of their planes is going towards the US. And hell, the characters in the movie even say, if this was the other way around, you'd do this. So they even make this point. You could play the movie completely differently, where the audience is sitting there going, is it a mistake, or are they trying to start a nuclear war? Like, they could play it that way for a different type of tension, but instead the tension of the movie is, can human goodness prevail? Can we convince them that no wrongdoing was intended here? And that, in a weird way, is almost more suspenseful because it's almost harder to buy. Like the mystery of, are they doing something bad or good, is almost more simplistic, whereas what they've given us here in this movie is, we know that no wrongdoing's been done and that nothing malicious is happening, but can we convince the other side that that's true or not? Will they believe us? Is a lot murkier and a lot more of a real human problem that applies to so many things about trusting people. It's so good.
Yeah. No, there's also the aspect to it of, even once you get them to believe it, like, you've already exhausted your options. You've already tried all the things you can try, and now it's up to them, and all you can do is offer like back end support. So there's this other thing where every second that the other side hesitates or our side hesitates, anything like that, just lowers the odds more and more and more of being able to get anything done here. And I think one of the best lines that they say midway through is, I think it's General Black who's like, "President, you should know, we've run all the calculations. No matter what the Russians do, at least one will get through." Yeah, because that's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, just to be clear, it's a squad of 6 planes, so they basically account for a couple of them getting taken out. So they're saying, hey, 1 or 2 are going to get through no matter what, because that's just what we've planned for. We've worked under the assumption that they'll take out most of them, but 1 will get through. So yeah. So just to clarify some sort of setup here, so General Black is with Walter Matthau in the Pentagon. They're in the war room, and they are like, because even before anything's going on, and this is part of the fun of when the inciting incident happens, is they've also got the screen up with the radar stuff on it that's in the military base. And basically, they're just there to have a debate, and they do this seemingly frequently about what happens if nuclear war happens, what the outcome should be, what the tactics should be. And Walter Matthau's an advisor. He's like saying this or that and try to convince them of things. And there's just a moment when one of them's having saying something where I think it's Matthau's giving a speech about something, and one of the other military men in the room just stands up staring at the screen as they realize, wait, why is one of our fighters going past the the fail-safe zone. So actually, to go back and explain all that, actually, because there's a lot of stuff in the first half hour that says, because they do like a false alarm, whereas like there's a UFO on the radar, and but that all they mean is literally an unidentified flying object, not a spaceship.
This is a prequel to War of the Worlds. This is exactly how it happens.
Sure. Yeah. And they're like, oh, what is it? We don't know. But there's a good chance it's just this or that. It's probably just a commercial airplane that's went out of course for some reason. And that actually ends up what it turns out to be. But there's like a little bit of tension that builds up of like, oh, it's dropped below radar level. Is that because they're being suspicious and stealthy? Is it because they're doing this? And
I do think it's smart, though, that during this bit, they repeatedly, because the senator's visiting whatever as well, they repeatedly reiterate, this is blasé to us. This happens like twice a week. Like, we constantly are dealing with this sort of stuff. And all we do is we scramble our jets to presupposed locations where they can easily get to Russia in the event that we need to invade Russia. But almost always we figure it out before the jets can even get to those locations. So like, this is not a big deal at all.
And even once they get there, we cut to the pilots at one point and they're saying, hey, old timer, because it's Grady who's flying in charge, the colonel, he's the old timer. And there was one scene of him at the base, like talking about how all these younger guys like don't really know them very well, and it's hard to get to know them because they keep shuffling around the cruise. But they cut to them in the plane during this bit, and like one of the young guys says, hey, like, what's the longest you've ever been at the failsafe position? And he's like, 3 minutes before we were recalled, because that's the longest it's ever been until they've established, oh, it's a false alarm, nothing bad's happening, you can go back to base. So obviously there's a bit of tension, and it's like, okay, but then obviously at the end of all this, that's when the malfunction happens, and they incorrectly think they're to go in and target Moscow. And they point out as well that they're going in over the North Pole. Like, that's where they're flying. They're flying over the top of the Earth, if you want to call it that. The north of the Earth, I should say. So it's like, hey, yeah, if we shoot down those planes, like, those pilots are not surviving. Like, if they parachute out of those things, they're just going to freeze to death, like, basically instantly. So there's no saving them, but we're committing them to death no matter what decision we make about shooting them down.
But I also really like the fact that they have to, this is the point where the president gets involved, and he's like, there's something going on, we need to sit down, like, we need to figure out what's going on. But the people in the war room say, like, look, we don't have that many options. We can keep hailing them, we can like just see what happens, we can wait it out, or we can send somebody to shoot them down. And they debate it, and they talk about it, and they say, like, okay, well, we've got a few minutes to sort this out, what it's going to be. And they wait pretty much just long enough that when they do finally decide we don't have any other options, we need to shoot them down, that the other planes that they're sending are not able to catch up. They are out of range. And so they're unable to actually complete their task.
And they end up dying. They end up getting out of the water because they run out of fuel trying to catch up to them. They fire some missiles off, but they're too far away to hit anything. And I think what I liked here is the weight of, like, even the decision to, like, shoot the planes down, because that's kind of a big deal, where we're, but it's kind of like, in hindsight, it feels so tiny compared to the decision the president has to make at the end of the movie. But yeah, he does weigh that up. He's like, oh, I hope we don't have to do that. I hope we don't have to actually go on the phone to the Soviet premier. Let's hope it doesn't get that far. But it does. He has to go on the phone. He has to explain to him, we've had this era, there's a plane coming towards you. And I do like the idea of, like, we're going to help you shoot this plane down. We want you to shoot this down. Like, we do not want this to happen. So here's everything we can help you with. Here's all the details. Like, go for it. But we don't think you're going to be able to, because we've planned too well for this.
Because we're America, god damn it.
And meanwhile, you got Walter Matthau going, this is an opportunity. We should just take this and just do a first strike. Let's just launch everything.
let's just take a second on Walter Matthau's character. So, like, you again, we see that he's a civilian. He is talking at, like, a party or whatever at the beginning, and he's basically saying, like, war's gonna happen. It's going, like, no matter what we do, we're gonna have nuclear war. It's just gonna happen, and all we can do is have the best possible attack, and that'll act as the best defense. And so when he's invited over into the Pentagon to talk to these people as a civilian, whatever, he's basically just making the point of, like, there's no chance of no war, but we can talk about limited war. And that's where he butts heads with General Black, who's basically on the side of, there's no such thing as limited war in nuclear warfare. Like, one is enough to be total war. Like, it will end up killing, like, everybody. And you just kind of get this butting of heads across the story, where Walter Matthau's I'll say charisma, but his confidence in him being right is the only thing that keeps on pushing him forward. Where even when everyone else is like, okay, the president wants to deal with it this way, we're trying to stop the nukes, we're trying to do whatever, he's still trying to convince everybody, right now, the Soviets think we're working with them. We can just switch sides real quick, start dropping real bombs, and they won't even know what hit them.
Yeah, he wants to betray the trust that may keep everyone alive. Like, we're all trying really hard to build this trust, and he's like, let's betray it. Let's just use this as an opportunity. And it feels, there's a great bit at the start, actually, when he's at that party that he's giving a speech at. And he says that, because someone says, who do you think will survive? And he says, I think it'll be the insurance clerks, and it'll be the prisoners, the most violent prisoners from like the solitary confinement, because they're underground. But at the end of the little story, or the joke, if you want to call it that, is him saying, well, you've got like a group that's really good at organizing, and then a group that knows violence. Which side do you think is going to win? And everyone just kind of laughs it off. And I thought, I'm not actually sure which point he was making there. Is he saying that the violent side will win because they can fight, or is he saying that the organizers are going to win because they can plan and scheme and plot?
So from that scene, I think that was him actually like saying that the two would be equal, because one would have strategy and the other would have just sheer violence to it. But I think that from the reason of him telling the story is that he views himself as the best of both sides. He views himself as, yes, I am seeking out violence, I'm seeking the first move, but I'm doing it strategically. I am literally the best of both sides in this situation.
Yes. And we see that he's very upheld in his beliefs, because there's that woman who's given them the eye that tries to seduce him in the car afterwards. And he slaps her in the face and says, I'm not for you, you whore. I mean, that's not what he says, literally, but that's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, he breaks her down, and assuming that his breakdown is accurate, he's basically like, yeah, no, you like the idea of being able to hold the lives of millions of people in your hand. You like the idea of it, but when you're actually presented with it, you back down. You stare into the void and it stares back.
Yeah, I mean,
and so you instead decide to hit on the guy who doesn't back down.
If nothing else, I think it's establishing that for him, it's not about the thrill of just killing people. Like, he's not in it for that. Like, you can say a lot about his beliefs, but I don't think you can say that he's just like some nut job who wants to like nuke people because he thinks it's exciting. I think that's the point of what that scene is.
Well, that's because at the very end, when we do get the president who's giving the quid pro quo, when he's saying like, look, if Moscow does get bombed, we'll give up New York. You see his reaction. He's one of the few that it cuts to where he's just like, no. Like, this is like, he is in horror that this is what's happening. So it's not that he wants nuclear war to happen. It's that he wants to protect his country. He wants America to be the one that survives all this. And the fact that he's seeing this happen of giving up an American city, he sees that as an absolute loss, even though it's the only thing that's keeping both countries from being destroyed.
Yeah, because like, if you don't, then they're just going to launch tons of nukes, and lots of cities are going to blow up. That's kind of the point here. He's willing to just sort of let it ride and see who survives. It's wild. And
then like the last bit really with his character is once the New York thing has been decided, they still have a chance of shooting down the last bomber, but once it's been decided, he gets up in front of everybody and is just like, if New York gets bombed, a bunch of companies are going to have all their records destroyed. We should go in and try to get those records because the economy will need it. And I'm like, oh, look at this guy talking about protecting the economy despite millions of people dying. All of a sudden, I'm back in 2020. This is great. Love it.
Well, for me, I think that was more about just tying back into this idea of how anti-communist he is. He's like, no, we have to protect our capitalism at all costs. It's very important.
Oh, yeah, no, that was the conversation he had with, I think it was General Black, or it may have been the guy in the war room, actually. But when he's basically sitting down and saying, the communist mind is uniquely different from any other human. Like, they will not react in a emotional way. If we drop bombs on them, they will immediately surrender because they'll do the math and realize they can't possibly win.
That's the gambit he wants to make, because he's like, as soon as they realize that Moscow's going to be destroyed, they're just going to give up, surrender, and we'll control the entire of the Soviet Union. It'll be under America's control. And it's like, what fantasy land are you living in? Also, to get to what you just said there as well, this idea, the communist mind won't react in an emotional, normal human way. I'm like, everything we see in this movie says he's wrong. because everything
yeah.
is showing us that they are having the same debates as that the Americans are. They're having the same kind of like actions where some of them are like revolting because they don't want to work with the Americans. They're being mistrusting, just like some of the people on the American side are being mistrusting. Both sides are the same. This is this is the sort of thing I love about like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where it's like, oh, like the humans and the apes both have like parties within them who are saying don't trust the others, they're the enemy, and you've got people trying to find the good, trying to like broke peace and make sure everyone can live in harmony, but then you've got the people on both sides who just have to ruin it and like, you know, create mistrust, create the conflict. And that's kind of what you've got here, is you've got people trying to see reason, trying to like form the trust and the bonds that are going to get us through all this, and then you've got people who are trying to literally take control of the war room by force, because we can't trust those Soviets and their communist ways, damn it.
I love that differential, because I've looked into a bunch of this stuff, you know, in the past 8 years of America. Obviously there's been a lot of stuff of that, but like one thing I've always been curious about is this idea of how do you have such wildly different viewpoints just on a fundamental level between like working together in empathy and then domination and wanting to win. Like, how do you have that within the same culture? And I think this movie does a great job of examining that and showing how both of those sides can come up just based off their own personal belief systems, off of their upbringing, how they see the world changes the way that they act amongst other people, whether they see it as we all have to get out of this together and like do the best we can as one large group, or they see it as everyone for themselves and I'm going to be the one that comes out on top.
Yeah, and then go back to that idea of like, oh, some of them are snapping under pressure. That's one of the things the president says to Buck, the translator. He's like, hey, you did a good job today. And he's like, all I've really done is say what someone else said. And he's like, you could have like cracked and like just passed out and you didn't. So you did your best today and you did a good job. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, I love the president and the Buck scenes. Again, I thought Buck was going to be just kind of someone for Henry Fonda to act against. He was going to be just sitting there, and it's absolutely, he does such a great job of delivering that. And there's a moment, I think it's while they're waiting for like the premiere or someone to make a decision or seeing what happens with the bombers, where he's not on the phone anymore. It's just quiet. And they just sit back and like talk about whether or not it's going to rain later that day. Like they just take a moment to try to establish like, the world is not going to end for us. Things are still going to continue on into tomorrow, and we just need to be able to get through this.
Well, I think for me that ties back into something else he says to him when he sort of try to pep him up for like the job. He's like, hey, I know this is going to seem too big, right? This is too big for you to be a part of. And it is really big, but it's only like everyone in it has to still make decisions to get through it. Like, I know it seems too big and daunting, but we have to get through it. And I almost think it's just like a humanizing moment of like, yeah, we're still people and it's still going to rain later. It's that, we're still, touching grass as it were, and remembering that we're doing this for everything else that's normal, as big as this seems. And in fact, the first time they have the call, which, it's that one, it's just a 2-shot the entire time. After that call ends, they kind of just sit there in silence for a good 30 seconds before the scene ends. Because I was thinking that eventually, like, the president was going to turn and like ask, like, how did he? Because he didn't. That first call, he didn't give too much of like an impression of what he was saying beyond just the actual words. It was pretty straightforward, and I was kind of waiting for Henry Fonda to turn around and ask a question, or but he just kind of looks over at him a couple of times, and like Buck's just sort of sitting there, kind of shaking a little bit. And eventually the scene just cuts away, and I was like, oh man, like you made me, you were hanging me on a thread, thinking that there was just a little bit of like, I thought it's interesting how they give us the president and this translator who obviously is relatively down the pecking order, but because of his job is uniquely appropriate for this situation, he's now in arguably the most important room in the world right now. And I love the idea that over the course of their scenes, there is like an almost friendship and working relationship that happens just through the work and the few things they have to say to each other to make sure they get through this and get things done. And then they share probably some of the most memorable moments of their entire lives together, as like he has to make these choices to do what he does to New York, and the translator has to hear these things and translate them, and all that stuff.
Dude, this is going like you think about what happens in the day after this. This is the defining moment of like the century. Like there's way that this is not the biggest moment of both of their lives immediately. And
both countries' lives. I mean, this is bigger than 9/11 by several magnitudes.
Oh, no doubt, absolutely. I mean, even if you go back to like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I'm pretty sure combined both of those is not going to be as big as they said. Moscow was 30 million people, right? I remember that number being thrown around.
I don't remember the number, but it sounds whatever. Like yeah.
But yeah, no, it's the one bit that I love though is that this is basically set on a set. Like we don't see the fourth wall, we don't see the other side of this office door, so it's just Buck sitting on the left side, President sitting on the right, and whenever they do a call, they do whatever. But you get this increasing intensity every single time we cut back to them, where I don't know if it's changing the angle, changing the lights, whatever it is, but when we get to the final ones, when we get to the point of the bomber has not been able to have been stopped, it's that final conversation where he says we have to learn from this. You start with both men in profile, and it's cutting between the two of them. And then the camera, over the course of their conversation, slowly turns into a straight dead-on shot. So they are staring down the camera as they say, we have to do better. We cannot let this happen again. And it just hits so well. It's so, like, just obviously Sidney Lumet knows his camera angles, but damn.
Yeah, and just to correct one thing, you do see the fourth wall. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not a set. I'm sure they had like two sides of a set that they could move in or out depending on what they needed for each shot. And the reason why I know that, though, is because I did note specifically that they crossed the line at one point where we were on the other side of the room, because we were seeing the president from his back from that side of the room. So they do specifically do that at one point. Not necessarily in the same scene as another one, but I do remember thinking, oh, we're seeing a completely different angle of them now, and it feels visually quite prominent that we're on the other side of the part of this story. So I think all of that is very pointed as especially the back half of the movie plays out. It's you know, I mean, maybe the Buck and the President stuff is my favorite scenes of the movie, but it's hard to tell, to be honest, because there's so much good stuff sprinkled throughout the other stuff. But I mean, it's, you know, because obviously there is some shots here or there of like planes flying, which is pretty rough looking, maybe stock footage, it might be models potentially.
So it was, you know, for a lot of movies that deal with military and stuff like that, even back then they tried to work with the government to like, you know, get them permission to film the airplanes in the air and do footage at that point. Because of the content, government wasn't playing ball with this one. They were not allowed to get any footage. So this was all stock footage of whatever planes were already in their library. So they weren't able to get anything new for this. And that's why it definitely looks a bit rougher. And I think they use it very sparingly where they only have to.
Yeah, I mean, it mostly just revolves around the idea of like what we don't see. It's all kind of like we're looking at the radar, people are commenting on it. It's very much that kind of thing where I don't know if this was ever done as a play, but if you could sort of split a stage into like 3 sets, you could absolutely do this as a play between the 3 rooms.
You get the 3 sets, and then up on the like top section, you just always have the radar like constantly updating, because that's the thing is between both the war room and the Pentagon area, those both have the exact same radar being shown at all times. So you can have this be a thing where all the characters are aware of what's happening on the radar at any given point. Yeah,
it's very meticulous in how it bounces around all those scenes, and there's points where they're basically on a conference call and everyone's listening in, and even at one point the Soviets are in the call because we're all working together in trying to take care. Because there is a moment, you know, we said about how like, maybe at the last second the premier might like say you don't have to actually go through with it. That is something that comes up in the conversation where, you know, the president's saying, hey, like, I've got a plane flying over New York. If Moscow is hit, I will order those bombs to be dropped. And the premier even suggests, like, I know you're probably hoping that I will say your intentions are good enough, that I will say your goodwill is all it's going to take. But if you were in my situation and it was the other way around and it was your city that was going to be destroyed, would you accept my good intentions as enough to stop like a war? And the president hangs his head and like sincerely says no. He knows he wouldn't, so he has to accept that this needs to happen. So there's a lot of weight to all the decisions being made in that last, you know, 15 minutes or so of the movie.
Yeah, no, I love that because they also do a little bit earlier on where they show that the president and General Black are apparently like childhood friends, or at least back in like school days or something like that.
They went to college together, I believe they said.
But they have this trust that goes beyond just commander and officer. They have this trust that is deeper than that. So when he tells General Black, like, I have an idea, if things keep on going south, how we're going to deal with that. And you don't tell the audience immediately, but you hint to it where he says the story of Abraham from the Bible, which is where Abraham offers up his son as sacrifice, and then God swoops in at the last moment and says, no, you don't have to do that. And then he asks Black, like, hey, is your family in New York right now? And he says yes. And the president's like, I'm going to be asking a lot of you then.
That's the line that told me what he was planning. It was your family in New York, and the weight that carried, I'm like, oh, I know what his counter offer is going to be to try and stop like further wars. Like, no, I'll offer you one big city of similar, size and stature to Moscow.
But even bringing up that story of Abraham gives you that idea, if you're aware of the story, that something's going to swoop in at the last second and stop it. Something's going to allow it to be like, your intentions are enough. You don't have to actually do this.
Yeah, because I think you're like, oh, it's a movie. It's going to let them away with like learning the lesson, but the actual destruction doesn't have to happen. Like, it'll stop at the last second, and both cities will be fine, right? Either the pilot gets convinced by his wife, which obviously does not work, because even one of the young guys, one of the other pilots, is like, hey, sir, is that really your wife? And he just doesn't really give an answer, Well, that entire sequence is also happening as they are forced to like deploy missiles to distract the Soviet missiles that are coming in. Like, they're doing, so it's a super high tension situation for him. And you see like on his, you don't see a lot of his face because he's wearing the pilot mask, but you see through just his eyes conveying like he is way too stressed out to consider the alternatives here. So he's just like, I have my orders, I have my mission, I have to do this. And he makes a choice actually right after that. He's like, okay, we're almost there. The only choice we really have now is what altitude we drop the bombs from. And I'm making the choice to go in low so that we get taken out with because if we don't, we're just going to be dead in a couple of days anyway, with radiation or whatever. So I think it's better that we just go at the center of the blast and just go with it. And the other pilots kind of agree. And that's like, it's like, oh shit, they're going to do it. They're not dropping. He's not being convinced by his wife at all. He is making the choice to go through. And it's almost like if he is considering the fact that might have been his wife and that maybe these orders have a chance of not being true, him dying with the bomb takes away any responsibility that he has to face afterwards. And I'm not saying he's a coward for that, but I do think there's an element of, well, I never have to find out if I made a mistake by doing this. So
I also love one of the pilot's responses is, well, he basically says, yeah, we're all going to die. I'm going to launch this with us in the blast radius. And the other pilot goes, yeah, there's nothing to go back to anyway. Like, he recognizes this is the end. If this is nuclear war, like, the world is over. There's nothing they can go back to regardless. It's not even worth trying.
Yeah, and we know how wrong he is, because by this point we know what the New York plan is. So, unless he's from New York, in which case he's he's accurate. But if he's from anywhere else in the US, he does have somewhere to go back to.
Bismarck, he's fine.
But it's what makes it so sad, though. Well, he's not fine if he's from Bismarck. He's alive. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah. But a bit of bummer.
But yeah, there's this kind of sadness of like, he's already kind of just accepted that all hope is lost when that's not true, and that's kind of like part of the tragedy of this is that all these pilots think that it's already over, and it isn't. But they're making decisions based on the idea that there's no other choice, and it's just, again, it hits harder. I don't want to spoil the end of the movie, but it makes me think a little bit of The End of the Mist. And for anyone who knows that movie, will know what I'm talking about there.
There's a similar, what I was thinking of, and again, I don't want to spoil how it all ends up, but it's a lot more of a Hollywood-fied version. Jack Ryan movie, Sum of All Fears, starring Ben Affleck. And it's set in this sort of Cold War sort of tension idea. It's set in this idea of Russia versus America. And obviously that one's a bit more Hollywood, but it is kind of an alternative to this movie, where it examines a lot of similar things of paranoia and such, but it doesn't follow quite the same trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that the start of the movie does give you a little bit of time with General Black, with his wife, because it starts with his nightmare and he wakes up and he's, he has like a little sleepy conversation with her when she's like half asleep, and he's saying, what are you going to do today? Oh, I'm going to go out shopping. The boys need like new jackets or something, she says. And he's like, oh, I'll leave some money out or whatever. This is before people had joint accounts with cards, I guess. But
this is before cards, I think. I don't think credit cards were really a thing.
Maybe not. Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know when that became a consistent thing. But it gives you a little bit of his family life in the same way that we get a little bit of Cascio's family life. And we get a little bit of these different, and we don't get it for all the characters, but I think it's interesting we get it for them, like the characters who are going to be directly involved in something like that. Whereas for some of the other characters, it's not until later where, like, we never meet the president's wife. We just see a photo of her in the newspaper that says the first lady's in New York, which I feel like. that is that really newsworthy. I feel like somewhat like an important high up person in America visiting New York feels like a fairly common place for them to go to me. But
the newspaper thought it was going to be a slow news day.
Yeah, I guess.
And so they put it in either way.
Well, joke's on them. I mean, she goes to Bismarck. Then get the parade ready.
Absolutely,
have the banners made.
Nothing. That's the biggest thing that happened in Bismarck since Bismarck was founded.
I love the idea that we've got one listener in Bismarck who's just sitting seething.
Yeah, he's just kicking rocks at the bottom of his feet, just like, man, why do we got to do that?
Anyway, so like. I think, like, giving these little human elements to some of the characters, just so that later on their decisions have got consequences outside of just, like, the war room itself, I think. And it also further actually makes Walter Matthau stand out as, like, someone who's so devout that he doesn't seem to have. Like, I mean, I think they mention that he's got a wife at the start, but you never see her. He never talks about her. The only thing we see him do is turn down someone. That's it. So it feels like he is very devout to what he is, and he's been partying all night till 5:30 in the morning, and he's still going in for this meeting at the Pentagon. Like you think he was 22 the way he's carrying on, not 50 or whatever he is in the movie. But it's interesting, like the way they build up some of these characters and how we see through their coping of the stress and the way they make their decisions, and how that informs how they view the world and how they view the crisis that's in front of them. And therefore, which one of them change a little bit over the course of the movie, and like how, they kind of like zone in. And arguably, now I'm thinking about it, do any of them actually change significantly? I think we're all hoping the pilot's going to. We're all hoping the pilot will be convinced.
Well, that's the bit that got me the most, was the pilot, because during his initial sequence, before he gets in the plane, before he goes anywhere, his whole conversation is, I don't trust these machines. I don't I don't trust. I prefer more that there's a person in the middle doing all that. And yet when it comes down to him making his decision, he sent the code, he does his thing. And when people try to intervene, when the president calls, when his wife calls, he shuts them down. So whether or not that's a belief in the machine more than humanity, whether that's a shift that he made or just the devotion to the mission, I think that's debatable at the very least.
Yeah, I don't think even if it is debatable, I don't think it's a devotion to a machine. I think he's following orders. I think he's doing what he's been told he's supposed to do. But it is, I think that's there at the start to add this hope that he can be convinced. This idea that when someone says a machine made a mistake, listen to the human being talking to you, listen to your wife talking to you, then maybe that'll break through to him. It's not, I don't want to say it's a red herring per se, but it's almost setting up the idea that there is a chance of convincing him. Because he also critiques like the younger pilots for saying, they're practically computers themselves. They just sit there all serious, like, unlike us. And David, I'm sorry, am I distracting you from pouring your beverage, which you've been slyly trying to do for the last 30 seconds?
No, it's been longer than 30 seconds, I'll tell you that much. I'm just trying to do it so it doesn't pick up on the mic. But no, I there was during that initial conversation, I also really liked the bit where, again, with the other people talking about machines and how like there's no blame to be assigned. I was thinking of like modern day AI stuff when they're talking about how the planes essentially fly themselves. I'm like, this is well before drone strikes and stuff like that. But like, it feels very prescient. It feels like something that is still being in that level of being talked about.
Yeah, because they're not saying that's a thing, but he's basically saying, well, it'll be pretty soon before we even need pilots in the planes. And I sort of chuckled because I thought, well, he's a bit wrong in that it definitely was not that soon in 1964 till we got to that point. But he is right, that was the future, and drones are now, so commonplace in the military and whatnot. But I was laughing that they could already see that end goal in mind. It was clear that was where it was always going to go, even in the 60s when it was decades away from actually happening.
I do like how this movie, it brings up this stuff of the increasing reliance on technology as a bad thing, but it doesn't entirely demonize the technology.
No.
Like it's saying like, yeah, we're going to keep on building bigger stuff. We're going to keep on doing that. That's inevitable. We're doing that. The choice we make is how much power we give it, is how much we put ourselves into it, how much we give up our authority over it. And I really like that as a viewpoint because that's evergreen. That is constantly something that humanity is going to keep on coming up against.
Yeah, and it's only getting more weird and complex as we get into like AI and just like, AI can just make all they are. No, it can't, but nice of you to try, I suppose.
I mean, when I have to watch the next Transformers movie for one of our podcasts, that's I'm going to make an AI persona to just answer all the questions. I ain't doing that.
No, you will watch it. I mean, the movie itself might be... I mean, actually, no. I'll tell you this. If something is clearly just AI slot, we're not reviewing it. I'm just going to put that out there now.
That's fair.
There's a stance that's being made.
Great.
But, it is kind of wild, because obviously this movie is so specific to its time period in that it's about the Cold War, it's about America and the Soviets, communism versus capitalism, all the rest of it. But at the same time, all of the actual themes, all of the human stuff that it's exploring is very evergreen, and it's why it holds up very well today. I think that anyone watching this probably just to have at least a basic understanding of what the Cold War was, just to understand the sides involved. But I think it doesn't matter that the technology now is ancient compared to what we all know. It doesn't matter that this is a time before certain things. It doesn't matter, like, everything that it's actually exploring in terms of like there's two sides to a conflict and we have to try and avoid the catastrophe when no one actually tried to start a fight. I think that holds up so spectacularly well regardless of time period and context.
Well, I think that even if you're unaware of the Cold War and whatever else, even like nuclear weapons as a whole, as long as you know the nuclear weapons are the end all be all, I think they do a great job in the beginning with the talks between Walter Matthau and all them of clarifying wars of the past, all like everything leading up to World War II and including World War II, they don't work as a comparison point anymore. You can't just say we're going to continue with the old warfare styles with nuclear weapons. It is a completely different ballgame being played because in the old style, you could mount an invasion. You could do all this stuff where you just march into the country with guns and do whatever. And it may result in, I mean, that was the initial conversation. It may result in 6 million dead, 10 million dead, however many dead. But if you do that with nuclear weapons, if you take that same viewpoint, everyone dies. There is no play just a little bit, take a little risk. It's all or nothing. And that's something that is a great job of establishing for even people who don't know about the Cold War or anything else like that.
Yeah, it feels, I mean, it's kind of a war movie in a sense, but I hesitate to call it that because I tend to think of a war movie as being something that's based on a real event. And this isn't. Right. This is speculative. You could almost call it science fiction. I wouldn't either. It's kind of in a weird middle ground between the two, to be honest. But it's...
I mean, that's called historical fiction. I think that this is the idea.
Sure.
It's the idea of what happens if, like, the Cuban Missile Crisis went the other way, basically.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of this idea.
But, I would maybe hesitate to call it a war movie because it isn't based on actual history. I would definitely call it an anti-war movie. Like, it's absolutely that in every fiber of its being. It's got a message. It's trying to get points across, and it wants you to think about and, not just have a bloodlust. Think about the mistakes. Think about what you're doing. And even if you don't care about an innocent life on the other side, and you should, but even if you don't, the amount of innocent lives on the side you are on that are going to die if this ever happens is something that has to be considered. And this idea of like mutually assured destruction basically saved the Earth in a lot of ways, because if only one side had them, then things would have went much worse potentially.
Oh yeah. I mean, could I just take like 30 seconds to talk about Stanislav Petrov? Like, I feel like anytime you got it. So for anyone who spent a little bit of time on the internet, you probably already know about him, but Stanislav Petrov was a Russian lieutenant. He was on, I believe, a submarine, and they got a false warning. They got a false alert that said, America has launched a missile. You need to react. And they were on the submarine. They had nuclear capabilities. They were fully able to launch this. And there were three officers, I should say, that had to come to an agreement in launching the missiles. Two of them said, yes, we're going to do that. We were given the go ahead. We're going to do that. Lieutenant Stanislav Petrov was the one person who said, no, we're not going to do that. And then it was soon after revealed that it was a false alarm, that it didn't actually, there were no missiles fired. So that one guy literally was the difference between full out nuclear warfare happening or not. And I feel that has to come up a little bit in discussion of this kind of movie.
Basically, it was Russian Crimson Tide, right? That was a Crimson Tide, just for the Russians instead of the Americans.
But it actually happened. That's the thing. That's the part that's crazy.
Well, when did that happen? Do you get a rough?
I believe I looked it up earlier in the thing. Believe it was 1980s. It wasn't like during
it was later then. It was
worst of it. 1983.
So it was fairly close to the end then of the whole thing.
And basically, he said his rationalization was, it doesn't make any sense that America would fire just one missile. If they were going to do it, they would do everything all at once in order to try to get it over on us. So this is probably just a false alarm.
I mean, he was right. And I wanted to the other two apologize or like sort of say, you know what, you were right after.
None of this ever came out until after he had died in, I believe, 2017. So, yeah.
Interesting. I was going to say maybe they'd punish him, but then would they? Because like he basically stopped the war for both sides, right? Because like if they'd launched some missiles, then it would have kicked everything off. So he also saved lots of Soviet lives. So
yeah, absolutely.
They can't even be mad at him. But I feel like they might be petty anyway, just because some of them have got a bloodlust, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, he did like disobey orders. He was like, he did do the thing that he was supposed to. From a military standpoint, yeah, he probably was punished to some extent.
Nah, that's not right. He did the right thing. The man's a hero. I can't believe I'm saying absolutely. A Soviet's a hero, but he's a hero, damn it.
Yep.
Well, hell, having said that, I've watched Chernobyl. There's at least half a dozen Soviets in that story that I'm like, they're heroes, damn it.
Pete, the whole point of the movie is the Soviets are like us.
Exactly.
That's the whole thing.
Ironically, because I'm more familiar with Americans, there's a lot more Americans I don't like than Soviets, just because I'm more confronted with Americans than I am Soviets.
I mean, same. Especially those Bismarckians, the bastards.
Don't pretend that you think about Bismarck. You don't.
That's true. That's true.
Well, I found out is it Hungary? I can't remember what country it was. I think it's somewhere like Hungary. It's somewhere in that part of the world. For some reason, you know, every country has another country that are the butt of their jokes, right? So, you know, we often make fun of English people. England likes to make fun of France, so on and so on. There's an Eastern European country. I think it may be Hungary or maybe it's Bulgaria. Maybe Bulgaria. But Scotland is the butt of their jokes, right? And this was just like a random fact that I found out. And I was like, this is so random. Like, why? We're not even close to them. Like, you'd think it would be a neighbor country. And the only thing I could think of is that Mad Men meme where I'm like, we don't think about them at all. Like, most Scottish people don't even know that country exists.
I mean, fair.
That's just such a weird thing. Someone could fact check which country it is, but
I'm trying to find it. I'm just typing in Mox Scotland. There we go. Hungary.
It's Hungary. Yeah, okay, right. I knew it was somewhere in that kind of vicinity. Yeah. All right, Hungary. Have at it. I mean, really, knock yourselves out.
As long as you don't make fun of America, we're very fragile.
Everyone has their rival that they make fun of, and then everyone collectively makes fun of America.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's fair.
It's simple because America likes to say it's the greatest nation on earth, and as soon as you've said that, you have painted a giant target to be made fun of. That is what that is.
You know, every once in a while, like, I look at the system and I think, man, I really want to, like, get involved. I want to be an activist. I want to do whatever. But then I say things on this show that I, like, any opponent could easily come in and say, like, this man is the most un-American man you have ever met in your life. And I'm like, kinda.
Anyway. All right, I think just before we get to the rating, though, because we did sort of pivot off topic there, ramping up to the end here, I want to reiterate just how effective the ending of the movie is. And because the whole thing is like this gut punch where you kind of like hold your breath a little bit as you realize there's no way out of this. They have to do this. Because when you get to that point where the only thing that can stop them having to bomb their own city is the premier jumping in and saying, no, wait, I don't want you to do it. And you don't really think that's going to happen. So it's like, no, at this point, we're just like seeing the outcome. So when it does start cutting to just shots in New York, because we mentioned the quick cuts at the very end where the flashes to white after them. But no, there's like full shot, all those things you get in those quick cuts. There was longer shots the first time it cuts to New York, and you just see kids playing on the street, you know, people coming in and out of their homes, stores. There's like a bunch of teenage girls dancing at the, you know, the sidewalk or whatever.
It's as they're doing the countdown from 10.
Yeah.
It's going 10, 9, and every time they hit a new number, it cuts to a new shot.
Yeah, you get this look at all these people, and it's kind of interesting that the movie's been talking about saving innocent lives the entire time, but it never just cuts to them, right? It never like shows you those people. There's a few at the start, perhaps, when they're setting characters up, but once we get in those rooms, we stay in those rooms, and it's all just in theory. We're all just in these bunkers discussing what's happening, or we're in the cockpit of the plane discussing what's happening. So when you cut to these shots of just civilians just living their life, and it's like any other movie, oh, there's a skipping rope with some girls jumping or whatever, it just feels like, oh, all these people are about to die. Like, and the movie's like withheld seeing people like this almost the entire time, so that it hits like a gut punch when it's happening. So when those quick flashes come, and you see just quick snippets of these people again before it goes to the white, it's like, oh, this movie's meant to be a punch to the gut. It's meant to be this brute force trauma to make you wake up and realize how much we have to avoid this. And it's obviously on this big end of the scale, but yeah, all the lessons in this apply to small scale things too. It applies to anything where there's two sides to a conflict, and we could work it out peacefully and to not let things get in the way of that. But, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it also just speaks to the idea of like, don't let it escalate to this point either. Like, yes, we can always talk it out or whatever, but even once they get to the point where they realize they have to talk it out, because they've escalated so high, because they have waited so long to talk it out, that even at that point, it's too little too late. Like, you need to, from the get-go, not go down this path, not have this sort of blind arrogance of thinking like, well, you know, we can there's always the chance we can save it in the end. That's the one I told you before earlier on in this review, that I was looking into like people's mindsets and how I never understood the idea of how those different, like the Warhawks and the empathy people, how they could exist in the same culture. But the one thing that I looked into a lot is the conspiracy theorist angle, like the people who are into all those conspiracy theories and stuff like that, and the end of the world, and like the people who kind of like push and push and push to get this sort of crazy stuff happening. And the one thing that I found is that there's kind of this belief that it's never gonna actually end. There's always gonna be something that's going to save everything at the last moment, and it's going to all be narratively satisfying in some way. And I think that's kind of the kudos to this movie of, it isn't.
No,
like,
it's not.
You have to sit with this, and you have to realize it's not always going to end well. And to keep on pushing down that path, you're going to end up with that.
Yeah, the point of this movie is that there was not a happy ending, right? It's happier than the worst thing that could have happened, but it's not happy in any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And it's like, we need movies like this because, you know, obviously most movies, good guys win at the end. That's such the common storytelling thing. And it's like, maybe 1 in 1,000 movies don't have the good guys win. But those 1 in 1,000, if that's even the right ratio, it may not be, is so important, because not only is it giving you a valuable lesson, which is what the purpose of this movie is, it's also giving you that little suspension of disbelief in every other story you read, every other movie you watch, that once in a while, the good guys don't win. And that just, it actually helps the medium as a whole, almost in a weird way, by having a movie like this.
But I do want to point out that what's special about this one, because obviously in modern cinema, you do get a lot of darker endings. You do get a lot of bittersweet sort of things. What's special about this one is, you say the good guys win. There are no bad guys in this. That's the key.
That's true. Yeah.
It's not a thing where the good guys lose because the bad guy is outsmarting them, or he's one step ahead, or he's a giant corporation and they're just one little person or something. This is a part where everyone wants this to work and it just doesn't. And it's important to say, like, yeah, you need to account for that sometimes.
Yeah, and it's our own fault that we can't fix it now. But that's kind of also a big part of it. So, no, really powerful, well acted, well shot, all the rest of it. It's, really got everything going for it. So, David, what are you rating Failsafe?
I watched it last night, and it was like shortly before I went to bed. Obviously, I stayed up for another hour just like thinking about it after that. But as I left that, I was leaving it with a 9. Talking about it now, I'm going up to a 9.5. I think this movie is fantastic. It is such a deep look into something, like, again, all that stuff we're saying where modern movies need to take this sort of step to show there are consequences for actions. We can't just like Hollywoodize everything. We can't do all that stuff and make it so that people do have to be introspective. They have to take a look at themselves and say, oh, I relate to this character, but he messed up in this way. What does that say about me? Why do I, maybe I should reevaluate some stuff rather than just the goddamn echo chambers we have nowadays. So yeah, 9.5. It's way ahead of its time, and it just seems like it's always going to be an evergreen kind of topic.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm landed on a 9. The movie's excellent. I think it's kind of a toss-up for me between this and Pawnbroker as far as which one I think is the stronger of the two. I think they're both very different films that are doing very different things. So it's hard to say which one resonates. I think there's obviously a more personal thing to Pawnbroker because it's this, obviously it's dealing with some big subjects as you're talking about the Holocaust, but it's all about this one person's experience and the humanity of what he's having to live through afterwards. This is more bigger in concept and the bigger scale of everything. But it's good stuff. Either way, excellent. And I think there's no weak link in the movie. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Good stuff.
Well, I when we did Pawnbroker, we debated whether or not it was a cut above or makes the cut. I think that kind of makes this one obvious where it's going, because we did decide on a cut above for the last one.
Yeah. I mean, we both give that a 9, I think. This one of us has went a bit higher, so I think it's fair to say that this is also a cut above.
Yep, fantastic. Happy to have it.
There we go. Nice. So that's another Criterion Collection movie in the books as well, may I add. So we can
start our own collection within the Criterion Collection now. Fantastic.
The Collector's Cut Criterion Collection. With a guest wing for Ace and Screams episodes that happen to be movies from the Criterion Collection. Yes. So yeah, there you go. That's Failsafe. Coming up next time, sticking with Sidney Lumet season, we have The Hill from 1965. So that's coming up next week. And of course, check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, the sci-fi show that me and David do. We've done some interesting movies recently. We did Save the Green Planet, which is a really good South Korean sci-fi movie. We did Ikari XB1, which is a Czechoslovakian sci-fi movie from the 60s. So if you're looking for more interesting, weirder picks, you can get those. That said, though, coming up in Ace over the next few weeks, we've got a bunch of new cinema releases. We got Begonia, we got Predator Badlands, the Running Man remake. All that stuff's coming out over the next month or so. So you can check out all that. Plus, like I said at the start, you can support the show, help keep it coming over at Patreon or via YouTube membership. Get access to the extra rating segment we do for each episode, where we do, visuals out of 10, audio out of 10, acting out of 10, all that kind of stuff. And of course, we do a monthly bonus show called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Recent treats have been Love on a Leash, Psycho Shark. We've done classic bad movies such as Troll 2, Miami Connection, Hard Ticket to Hawaii, a whole host of stuff. Some of them are so fun they're great, some of them are torture, but that's okay.
Yes.
There's a whole range in between. So if that sounds like fun, you get that if you want to support us. But mainly, you're helping make sure the show keeps coming. So thanks to everyone who already supports us. But that wraps up the business. So we're done for the week. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.